Hello everyone and welcome to Lancaster Safety's Webinar Wednesdays. Before we start, I'd like to point out a few features in our webinar room. If you have a question, please type it below at the bottom of your screen. We will address any questions after the webinar is complete. If your connection is slow, you can't hear or see the presentation, try reloading the page by clicking the X inside the webinar room. Our presentation will run about 30 minutes long. So today we're going to be discussing the similarities and differences between Federal OSHA and California's state-run program. Our presenter is one of our very own occupational safety and health consultants and trainer, Mr. Greg Cole. Greg has been a trainer and consultant for Lancaster Safety for almost 4 years now, and he has 30 years of experience in safety, which includes an extensive background working with Cal-OSHA. Greg is also an OSHA outreach trainer and is here to help clarify what companies who work in California need to know about CalOSHA. So today we're going to be discussing what is an OSHA-approved state plan, what is CalOSHA, how is CalOSHA different from Federal OSHA, and how are they similar? Who has to comply with CalOSHA? Do you have to comply with CalOSHA, Federal OSHA, or both? Can you be cited by both agencies? Also, make sure you stick around till the end because we have a free download for all of our attendees today. So Greg, can you go ahead and start off by talking about what is an OSHA-approved state plan?
Well, OSHA approves and monitors all state plans and provides up to 50% of funding for each program. State-run safety and health programs must be at least as effective as the federal OSHA program. OSHA provides coverage to certain workers specifically excluded from a state plan, for example, those in some states who work in maritime industries or on military bases. State plans must set workplace safety and health standards that are at least as effective as OSHA standards. Many state plans adopt standards identical to OSHA. State plans also have the option to promulgate standards covering hazards not addressed by OSHA standards. A state plan must conduct inspections to enforce its standards, cover state and local government workers, and operate occupational safety and health training and education programs. Currently, there are 22 states or territories that have OSHA-approved state plans, and this webinar will focus on the differences between Federal OSHA and CalOSHA.
So what exactly is CalOSHA?
Well, CalOSHA is the common name for the California Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1973, which was enacted by the California legislature just 3 years after the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. CalOSHA is one of the states and provinces in the U.S. who have opted to participate in the OSHA-approved state plan program.
So does CalOSHA cover all of California businesses?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so this actually brings us to our first InstaSafety Poll quiz. So the question that we're going to be focusing on is, how do OSHA-approved state plans improve workplace safety? So the options are A, states have the freedom to not set regulations, so employers and employees don't worry about OSHA, have less on their minds, and work more safely. B, state-run programs must prove to be at least as effective as Federal OSHA that can only leave room for improvement. C, it improves enforcement within each state so that Federal OSHA doesn't need to be active. Or D, all the above. So go ahead, I'll give you a chance to put your answers in. And we'll just give you one more moment to get any final answers in. Okay, so the answer was actually B. State-run programs must prove to be at least as effective as Federal OSHA, so that can only leave room for improvement. Greg, are you able to just kind of explain why the answer was B and not all of the above?
Well, a state-run program has the ability to focus on elements within their state that maybe federal rule may have just briefly scratched on the surface. And when we talk about being at least as effective, the state has the opportunity to actually make it more stringent than federal. And that's accepted as long as it at least meets what federal OSHA requires. And I know there are some areas in California that hit that mark and exceed it. And I know we'll be covering some of that today. Now, what are the benefits of having an OSHA-approved state plan? Well, the state has their own plan, which allows them to focus, again, on any specific areas that federal OSHA may not have focused on. Every state's a little different, so the environment's a little different, situations are a little different. So having the ability to have a state-run plan allows for the state to dig a little deeper and focus on the areas of concern that are applicable to their state. Some of the similarities between CalOSHA and FedOSHA, let's take a look at that today. And both agencies set goals toward providing safe and healthful working conditions. They set safety and health regulations. They assist and encourage employers to maintain safe and healthful working conditions. They provide for research, information, education, and training in the field of occupational safety and health. They also require reporting on work-related incidents. They enforce regulations and assess penalties. Again, those are some of the similarities. They also comply with the agency's regulations. They establish, implement, and maintain written safety and health programs, which we'll talk a little bit further about in a few more slides. They provide safety training to employees, and they report work-related incidents. Now, if your company needs any assistance with any of these, this is something that Lancaster Safety can help you with. Now, some of the differences between CalOSHA and Federal OSHA, while both agencies have similarities, when you break each one down, it's clear that the specifics do differ. Now, let's break each one of the similarities down to see how CalOSHA and Federal OSHA truly do differ. Again, keeping in mind they have similar goals, they both establish regulations, they require training. The specifics of each agency's requirements and established enforcement procedures do differ. Let's take a look at a few of those. We're going to take a look at hazard communication, additional standards, consider required permits, required notifications, public safety, general duty clause, and also civil penalty amounts. Now, CalOSHA has goals, as does Federal OSHA. CalOSHA, the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, you might know them as DOSH, better known as CalOSHA, protects and improves the health and safety of working men and women in California and the safety of passengers riding on elevators, amusement rides, and tramways through the following activities: setting and enforcing standards, providing outreach, education, and assistance, issuing permits, licenses, certifications, registrations, and approvals. OSHA's mission is stated: with the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, Congress created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, to assure safe and healthful working conditions for working men and women by setting and enforcing standards and by providing training, outreach, education, and assistance. Now, the safety and health regulations, CalOSHA has established the following unique standards. They cover toxic chemical handling and exposure, agriculture, repetitive motion injuries, child labor, heat exposure, noise exposure, injury and illness prevention program, aerosol transmissible diseases, petroleum drilling and production, petroleum refining, transport and handling. Now, CalOSHA has adopted occupational safety and health standards which are at least as effective as Federal OSHA. But again, they do differ, and they do have some areas that are more stringent. Now, CalOSHA has adopted occupational and safety health standards such as hazard communication, lockout, tagout, electrical safety, personal protective devices, forklifts and industrial trucks, fall protection, fire safety, and emergency action plans. They've also opted to adopt additional standards which are unique to CalOSHA. And we listed those out, but again, they're toxic chemical and handling exposure, agriculture, repetitive motion injuries, child labor, heat exposure, noise exposure, injury and illness prevention program, aerosol transmissible diseases, petroleum drilling and production, and petroleum refining, transport, and handling. Now, similar to OSHA, CalOSHA's regulations are broken down into safety orders for different industries. Two examples of these are General Industry Safety Orders, GISO, or the Construction Safety Orders, the CSO. While Federal OSHA does not have specific standards in place for these topics, employers are still required by the OSHA Act to keep employees safe from recognized hazards. CalOSHA's regulations are at least as effective as Federal OSHA, and some contain more specific rules and regulations within the topic. Federal OSHA has established a general duty clause, which is essentially covering any workplace hazard that is not addressed in a specific regulation. CalOSHA does not have a general duty clause, and therefore the rules and regulations established are detailed and specific in order to cover a wide variety of hazards. Now, even though CalOSHA does not have a general duty clause, we still function with the intent of that structure, providing a safe work environment for all of our employees. Safety and health regulations. The Hazard Communication Standard, you refer to them oftentimes as Hazcom. Now, on the outside, both standards, Federal and California, look very similar. However, when you dig into them, it's clear that there are some major differences. CalOSHA incorporates what's called Proposition 65. And Prop 65 is California's proposition, also called the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act. It was enacted in 1986, and it's intended to help Californians make informed decisions about protecting themselves from chemicals known to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm. Special provisions must be made when using these chemicals in the workplace. When it comes to obtaining a safety data sheet, there are some extra steps that California has enacted. You can make a written inquiry to the manufacturer or importer responsible for the SDS, asking that they complete SDS be sent. If a written inquiry has been made in the preceding 12 months as to whether the chemical or product is subject to the requirements of the Act, or a written inquiry has been made within the last 6 months requesting new, revised, or later information on the safety data sheet, to notify the requester in writing of the date that the inquiry was made, to whom it was made, and the response, if any, received. Providing the requester with a copy of the inquiry sent to the manufacturer, producer, or seller, and a copy of the response will satisfy this requirement. Also, notify the requester of the activity of the SDS within 15 days of receipt from the manufacturer, producer, or seller, or provide a copy of the SDS to the requester within 15 days of receipt. We also have carcinogen reporting. All employers who use a regulated carcinogen shall report that use in writing to the chief. And it's good to point out that the words should and shall are very different when it comes to CalOSHA, as also in FedOSHA. This is not a suggestion. That would be should. It's saying all employers who use a regulated carcinogen shall report that use in writing to the chief. There are also ongoing updates to the permissible exposure limits, the PELs. The CalOSHA reviews the PELs continuously to determine if they should be updated. Federal OSHA updates their PELs much less frequently. Since the original Federal OSHA PELs from the 1970s, CalOSHA has added to or revised its PELs more than 20 times. Now, the safety and health regulations covering the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. Some states might just call them their safety program. CalOSHA calls it an Injury and Illness Prevention Program. An Injury and Illness Prevention Program, the IIPP, is a proactive process to help employers find and fix workplace hazards before workers are hurt. It's important to note here that CalOSHA is glad that we find the problems when we do some type of inspection or analysis, but they don't want us to stop by simply identifying them. We're required to also fix them and document how we fix them. While Federal OSHA does not require employers to establish an IIPP, they do recognize it as an effective tool to help employers find and fix hazards before injuries, illness, and deaths occur. It meets their obligation under the OSHA Act to furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. It also helps us to avoid significant costs associated with injuries in the workplace. Employers in California are required to have an effective written injury and illness prevention program, which includes certain elements. I want to point out here that the CalOSHA requires us to develop, implement, and maintain an effective injury illness prevention program. Developing it is one thing. Implementing it is a process that takes place. The maintenance phase, once again, is something that Lancaster Safety can assist you with. They can assist in all phases, but the maintenance phase is where we would go and do inspections to verify that workers are actually doing what the company has put in writing saying they would do. And that is how we measure the effectiveness of the program. It's, again, through the constant evaluation and reevaluation of how workers work and how it's being communicated, the expectations, rather, are being communicated to the workers. To be effective, your IIPP must fully involve all employees, supervisors, and management. It must identify the specific workplace hazards employees are exposed to. They must correct identified hazards in an appropriate and timely manner. And we have to provide effective training. And each written IIPP must include responsibility. Who is responsible for which task or which areas of work? We have to explain compliance. How will we as a company comply with what CalOSHA says we must comply? How will we communicate? Communication is another element of the IIPP. Will it be through documents that we mail out? Will it be through safety training? Will it be through quarterly or annual training? All of those can be part of it. And then hazard assessment. How are we identifying the hazards? When do we identify the hazards? Accident exposure investigation. When there's any accident, any injury, any exposure, it must be investigated and documented as to what caused the problem. We like to get down to a root cause analysis. And then hazard correction. If we identify a hazard, that's part of the hazard assessment, we come down to hazard correction. We must document, and your IIPP must have a system in place that allows for the company or individuals to correct the hazards. And then training and instruction. What training will we provide? How will it be provided? When will it be provided? And does it need to happen again? Maybe every year, maybe every 3 years? Is there a schedule that explains when training will take place? And then record keeping is the last item that's required in the IIPP. How will we record? When will we record? Where do those records go? How much must be shared or can be shared with the workforce? Now, there are a lot of free resources that you can find online. Both CalOSHA and Federal OSHA have many resources for employers and employees available on their own personal website. Federal OSHA is www.osha.gov, and then CalOSHA is dir.ca.gov. Those websites provide a lot of information, not just for employers, but for employees. Each agency has established special initiative programs such as workplace violence, temporary workers, safety stand-down for falls, publications on a wide variety of topics in English and Spanish, e-tools, videos, and many other resources. Again, Lancaster Safety can also be a resource for you. If you have questions, you can call us and we can assist you.
All right, well, this brings us to our next question, which is, can a company be fined by Cal-OSHA and Federal OSHA on the same inspection? So go ahead and you can answer yes or no. We have a few more responses coming in, so we'll just give it another moment. Okay, so the answer is actually B, no. Greg, would you be able to just give a brief explanation on why a company cannot be fined by both?
Well, each state that has its own state plan is governed by that state's plan. And so since we have to be in compliance with federal OSHA rules, we have authority, we being the state's plan, has authority over its workers and the implementation and follow through of their own plan. Now, federal OSHA, they have their general duty clause, section 5A1, which requires that employers shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. CalOSHA does not have a general duty clause and issues citations solely based on the specific regulation verbiage. The citation issuance and abatement processes vary between federal OSHA and CalOSHA.
Greg, are you able to give us an example of that?
Well, I know that each agency has a process if a citation is issued in the time frame in which they can respond and what the process is to respond and to possibly get it adjusted, or the abatement process can take place also during an inspection. Now, the state plan, CalOSHA's plan, they're a little different in the area of required permits and notifications. The construction permits through CalOSHA are required for the following operations. Anytime there's trenches deeper than 5 feet, there is a permit process that must be complied with. It's called a T1 annual excavation permit. And then construction, demolition of any building 3 stories or 36 feet high. Erecting or dismantling of scaffolding 3 stories or 36 feet high. Erecting or dismantling of vertical shoring systems, also 3 stories or 36 feet high. These are specific to CalOSHA. CalOSHA requires a notification be made to them for asbestos and lead work, mining, annual permit holders, prior to construction, and in the case of serious fatal accidents. Federal OSHA only requires notification in the case of a serious or fatal accident. Again, with the notification process when it comes to trenching and excavation in California, if you hold a T1 annual excavation permit, each time that you're going to excavate in excess of 5 feet in depth, there's a notification process that must be sent in to the district before you start work. Now, there are required postings. These are notifications that are set up and established where employees would normally congregate. That might be the corporate office. That could be a job site trailer. If you have a mobile job site, it could be what we nickname the OSHA board. It's just a sheet of plywood where we would staple these compliance posters to and move from project to project. And the compliance posters are very easy to obtain. They're specific, item by item. Or you may purchase an all-in-one compliance posters, which are either state-specific or federal-specific.
And Greg, if a company would like to obtain one of these posters, where would they be able to get that from?
Well, you can talk to Lancaster Safety, and they can provide the OSHA posters to each of their clients.
Now, does Federal OSHA have requirements for public safety?
Well, Federal OSHA does not address public safety. However, they will take an active approach toward public safety by making recommendations when public safety hazards are observed. CalOSHA is a little different. They have specific areas that they would address. Now, the operating of aerial passenger tramways require permit. A qualified safety inspector is required to inspect permanent amusement rides, and this certification, which is called the QSI, is obtained directly by OSHA.
All right, so we have come to our last InstaSafety Poll quiz. So the question we have here is, if your company has a location in California and another in Texas, which requirements must you comply with? Would it be each location must comply with both sets of standards? Each location must comply with the state of which they are located? Each location must comply with the standards of whichever state the main location is in? Or the last one would be both locations are exempt from workplace safety standards as it would be impossible to enforce. So we'll go ahead and give you a moment to enter your answers. We have just a couple other answers rolling in. We'll give it just another moment. Okay, so the answer was actually the second one. Each location must comply with the state of which they are located. So Greg, could you go ahead and just kind of summarize what we've talked about today?
Sure. Now, many states have OSHA-approved state plans that can take a more active approach in addressing safety concerns. It's important to understand the differences if you perform work in various states. You may be covered by CalOSHA normally, but if you begin to do work in a state other than California that's covered by the Federal OSHA rules, you need to know what they are and know the differences and make sure your workers are trained in those differences when they go into that environment. While there are many differences, Federal OSHA and CalOSHA exist today to work toward the goal of improving workplace safety.
Now, as a thank you for those of you who attended today, this Cal-OSHA and Federal OSHA comparison chart is going to be available to everyone here. You can actually access this printout via the free download button on the screen in front of you. We can actually also email out the document as a follow-up if you wish. So once again, we want to thank everybody for attending today. Greg, thank you for being a part of this discussion and just sharing your knowledge and experience on Federal OSHA versus Cal-OSHA. We would love to hear everybody's feedback, so please take a moment by either filling out the star rating at the close of this webinar, or if you could, go ahead and write us a review on Google or Facebook. All you have to do is click on the images right in front of you, and that will take you to the screen to write the review. Of course, if you have any additional questions or you'd like to set up a facility inspection or you want to gather any more information on our services, please feel free to visit our website. It's www.lancastersafety.com. Again, thank you to everybody for attending, and we hope that you have a safe day.